He was broke, homeless, living inside an uncompleted building with his wife. One day, a rich man had a terrible accident right in front of him. While everyone rushed to steal, he protected the man's life and guarded his luggage. That night, hunger screamed. The bags sat beside him, locked. What he did next changed his life forever. Bamidele Arewolo used to wake up before the sun, not because life was cruel, but because hope still worked. Hope was an alarm clock in those days. He would rise quietly from the thin mattress, careful not to wake Marumkiji. The room was small, one step from wall to wall, but it held peace. A cracked bulb hung from the ceiling like it was tired of shining, yet every night it still tried. The air smelled of cement dust, old soap, and the soft scent of his wife's hair. To Bamidele, it smelled like survival. Outside, cold water shocked his face awake. He whispered a prayer, short and honest. No big words, just, "Let today answer me." Construction work was not kind to the body, but it was fair to the soul. At the site, Bamidele lifted blocks until his arms trembled, mixed cement until his palms burned, and climbed scaffolding without fear. Men trusted him. Foremen respected him. If Bamidele said a job was done, it was done. He returned home every evening, covered in dust and fatigue, but never in shame. Marumkiji always knew when he was close. She listened for his footsteps, the way hungry people listen for rain. Sometimes she had food waiting. Sometimes she only had warm water and a smile. But she never greeted him like a defeated man. "How was today?" she would ask. "Manageable," he would reply. That word carried everything: stress, hope, exhaustion, pride. And Marumkiji understood it perfectly. They were not rich. They counted coins. They planned meals. They postponed dreams. But they laughed easily. They shared roasted corn at night and joked about things that did not matter. They spoke about the future softly, as if raising their voices might scare it away. "One day," Marumkiji said once, leaning against him, "we will live in a house where rain knocks before entering." Bamidele smiled. "And the landlord will greet us first." They laughed, the kind of laughter that hides gratitude. In those days, Bamidele walked with his head high. Rent was paid, neighbors greeted him with respect. Shop owners trusted him on credit without fear. He could help others and still help himself. He was poor, but he was standing. But life is sneaky. It does not always shout before it changes. Some nights, Bamidele lay awake, staring at the ceiling, counting tomorrow's needs. Cement prices were rising. Work rumors moved faster than truth. He felt pressure pressing against his chest, but he swallowed it whole. He did not bring those worries home. Marumkiji noticed anyway. She noticed when his laughter shortened, when silence followed him into the room, when his shoulders slumped without explanation. She never pushed him. Instead, she became softer. More prayers, more patience, more presence. Love to her was not asking questions that would break a man already carrying too much. One evening, rain attacked without warning. Water rushed into the room, soaking the corner where their things rested. Marumkiji gasped and jumped up. "Our house is testing us," she said, laughing as she lifted their belongings. Bamidele joined her, lifting the mattress higher. Rain poured. The room smelled of wet dust. Their clothes clung to their bodies. Yet they laughed. Real laughter. The kind that says, "We are still alive." That night, as rain drummed hard on the zinc roof, Bamidele held Marumkiji close. His arms were tired, but his heart was full. He promised himself quietly that no matter what happened, he would not let life take this from him. He did not know that life was already rearranging things. He did not know that stability was about to become memory. For now, life still answered his effort, and sometimes the most dangerous season is when you think you are safe. The first sign that something was wrong was not the sack letter, it was silence. For 3 days, Bamidele's phone did not ring. At first, he told himself it was nothing. Construction sites were like that sometimes. Delays happened. Payments slowed. Men waited. Hope stretched. He still woke up early, dressed the same way, and left the house with purpose. He still kissed Marunkaji's forehead and said, "I'll be back." But by the 4th day, the silence grew teeth. When he finally went to the site, the gate was locked. No noise, no shouting, no cement smell. Just a notice pasted crookedly on the gate, fluttering like it was ashamed of what it carried. Project suspended. Bamidele read it once, then again. Then he stood there like a man waiting for the words to apologize. They didn't. Other workers gathered around, murmuring, cursing, shaking heads. Someone laughed bitterly. Someone else spat on the ground. A foreman walked past without meeting anyone's eyes. Just like that, months of sweat became history. Bamidele walked home slower than usual. That evening, Marunkeji noticed it immediately. "You're early," she said. "Work finished early," he replied. It was not a lie. It was just incomplete truth. Days passed, then weeks. Bamidele woke every morning with the same discipline, the same prayer, the same hope. He searched for work under the sun until his shirt stuck to his skin. He moved from site to site, from office to office, from promise to promise. "Come back next week. We will call you. There's no vacancy. Do you know anyone inside?" Each rejection shaved something off him. At home, Marunkeji watched the changes quietly. The food reduced. The laughter shortened. The conversations became careful. Some nights, Bamidele ate slowly, like a man trying to make food last longer than hunger. Bills began to stack up like enemies waiting their turn. Rent came knocking first, then electricity, then water. Each knock sounded louder than the last. One evening, Bamidele returned home empty-handed again. He sat on the edge of the bed, boots still on, staring at nothing. Marunkeji brought water and knelt to wash his feet, the way she always did. "I didn't get anything today," he said suddenly. She looked up at him and smiled. "Tomorrow is still breathing." That sentence held him together. But the world outside was not patient. Neighbors who once greeted him warmly now nodded from a distance. Shop owners who once trusted him now asked for cash before smiles. Friends stopped calling. Invitations dried up. Pride became heavy. Shame became louder. One afternoon the landlord came. He didn't knock gently this time. "Bamidele," he shouted. "How long will you be dodging me?" The words hit like stones. Neighbors gathered. Children stared. Bamidele stood there, nodding, apologizing, shrinking. "I will pay," he said. "Please give me time." Time, however, had become expensive. That night, Marunkeji held him as he lay awake, staring into darkness. His chest rose and fell like it was carrying something too heavy. "I'm trying," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "I know," she answered, "and I'm here." But even love has limits when hunger keeps score. Days turned into weeks, weeks turned into fear. The house that once felt safe now felt like it was counting down. One evening, as Bamidele walked home after another useless day, he noticed something painful. People were no longer asking him how he was. They were asking him how long. How long before you pay? How long before you move? How long before you give up? That night, he did not sleep. He sat outside, listening to the city breathe, wondering when his own life stopped listening to him. He replayed every decision, every step, every prayer. He felt like a man standing on a bridge that was slowly disappearing behind him. Murunkeji joined him quietly and sat beside him. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "we will face it together." Bamidele nodded, but inside him, fear tightened its grip, because deep down he knew something was coming, and it would not knock politely. Kunle Adesina returned into Bamidele's life the way false hope always does, smiling. They met by accident one afternoon near a roadside kiosk. Kunle was dressed well, clean shoes, confident voice, the kind of man who spoke like life still listened to him. "Bamidele?" Kunle said, squinting as if surprised. "Ah, is this not you?" Bamidele smiled weakly. Familiar names had started sounding like rescue ropes. They sat, talked, remembered school days, laughed at old stories. Kunle shook his head slowly, pretending to feel pity. "You're too hard-working to be suffering like this," Kunle said. "This thing you're doing, looking for daily jobs, it will kill your spirit." Bamidele listened. That was the mistake. Kunle spoke of business, of contacts, of products that moved fast, of profit that came quick. He spoke with confidence, the kind that silences doubt. "All you need is small capital," Kunle said, "just to stand again." That sentence entered Bamidele's chest and refused to leave. At home that night, Bamidele told Murunkeji everything. She listened without interrupting. She looked at his eyes, the tired hope, the fear of sinking further. "What do you think?" he asked. Murunkeji paused. "If you believe it will help us stand, try. But please, be careful." Bamidele borrowed money, from neighbors who hesitated, from friends who sighed, from people who looked at him like he was already late. He handed everything to Kunle. Kunle smiled, promised returns, promised dates, promised relief. Then Kunle disappeared. Phones stopped connecting. Messages stayed unread. Offices Kunle mentioned did not exist. People Kunle named denied knowing him. Reality hit like a slap. Bamidele sat on the edge of the bed that night, staring at his empty hands. The room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. His breath sounded too loud. "I've ruined us," he whispered. Murunkeji said nothing. She sat beside him and held his shaking hands. Morning came, then another. Then fear grew legs. The landlord came again. This time, he did not shout first. He walked in slowly, looked around the room, counted silence, then spoke. "You people have stayed beyond mercy." Bamidele begged. His voice cracked. He promised. He pleaded. The landlord laughed, not loudly, just enough to wound. "Hope is not rent," he said. Neighbors gathered. Some watched with sympathy, some watched with satisfaction. Shame stood in the doorway like an unwanted witness. They were given hours to pack a life into bags. Murunkeji wrapped clothes with trembling hands. Bamidele carried what little they owned, his back bent not from weight, but from defeat. When they stepped out, the door closed behind them with a sound that felt final. That night, they slept in an uncompleted building. No door, no windows, just bare blocks and cold concrete. Wind entered freely. Rats moved like landlords. Rain whispered threats from above. Marunkeji spread a wrapper on the floor. Bamidele sat beside her, silent. "I failed you," he said. She shook her head. "We're still together." But hunger has its own voice. Days passed. The uncompleted building became home. Shame became routine. Bamidele searched for work with desperation now, not hope. People avoided his eyes. Some crossed the road. Friends came, not to help, but to advise. "Leave him. You're still young. Don't waste your life." Marunkeji listened, then refused, quietly, without drama. One afternoon, while Bamidele was away, Marunkeji removed her jewelry. Every piece carried a memory, a sacrifice, a story. She sold them all. That evening, she placed the money in Bamidele's palm. "What is this?" he asked. "Our tomorrow," she replied. Bamidele broke. He cried the way men cry when pride finally collapses, silent, violent tears. He pressed his face into the dirt floor of the uncompleted building and begged God for forgiveness, for strength, for direction. Life had taken their roof, but it had not yet taken their values. Unknown to them, destiny was already walking toward them, slowly, disguised as tragedy. The uncompleted building did not welcome them. It did not pretend to. Bare blocks stared at Bamidele and Marunkeji like cold eyes. No doors, no windows, just holes where protection was supposed to be. The floor was naked concrete, rough enough to remind you that comfort was a privilege. The first night was the hardest. Wind walked in freely, lifting dust, whispering mockery. Rats moved without fear, bold like they paid rent. Somewhere above, rain threatened, tapping lightly as if testing their patience. Marunkeji spread a wrapper on the floor and sat down. "This place," she said softly, forcing a smile, "at least it is not asking us for rent." Bamidele laughed once. It broke halfway. That night, sleep refused to come. Hunger spoke loudly. Shame spoke louder. Bamidele lay awake, listening to his wife's breathing, counting every rise and fall like it was proof that he had not lost everything yet. Morning came without apology. Days began to stretch in painful sameness. Bamidele left early, searching for work with desperation now, not hope. Construction sites turned him away. Men avoided his eyes. Some offered advice that tasted like insult. "You should learn patience. Things are hard for everyone. God will do it." God, it seemed, was busy elsewhere. Marunkeji stayed behind, guarding their few belongings like they were treasures. She fetched water. She cooked when there was food. When there wasn't, she smiled and said, "We'll eat later," as if later was a promise and not a prayer. Rain became an enemy. When it came without mercy. Water ran down the walls, soaking their wrapper, pooling around their feet. Marunkeji lifted their things again and again, laughing through clenched teeth. "Our house is crying," she joked once. Bamidele turned away, so she wouldn't see his eyes. Neighbors noticed. Some came to stare, some came to gossip, some came with advice that sounded kind but carried poison. One afternoon, a woman pulled Marunkeji aside. "Why are you still here?" she asked. "This suffering is not love." Another said, "A woman must be wise. Leave before your youth finishes." Marunkeji listened politely. Then she stayed. Every evening, when Bamidele returned empty-handed, she welcomed him the same way. She did not ask, "Did you get money?" She asked, "Are you okay?" That question saved him more than food ever could. One day, Bamidele returned later than usual. His steps dragged. His shoulders were folded inward, like they were tired of carrying him. He sat on a block and buried his face in his hands. "I'm useless," he said. "I'm tired of trying." Moronkeji sat beside him. She did not argue. She did not correct him. She rested her head on his shoulder. "You are not useless," she said quietly. "You are just passing through fire." Fire, however, burns. Hunger became familiar. 2 days passed without proper food. Bamidele drank water until his stomach felt full of lies. Moronkeji chewed nothing and smiled anyway. That night, as darkness swallowed the uncompleted building, Bamidele lay awake again. But this time, something different stirred inside him. Not hope, resolve. Life had stripped him down to bone, taken roof, pride, dignity, left him naked before the world. But one thing remained untouched: his character. And somewhere, unseen, the road ahead was already preparing a test that would decide everything. That morning, Bamidele left the uncompleted building with a heaviness that did not belong to the weather. The sun was out, bright and careless. People moved about their lives like nothing in the world was wrong. Traders shouted, engines roared. Somewhere, laughter rose. To Bamidele, it all sounded distant, like life was happening behind a closed door. He had walked the same roads too many times, sight to sight, promise to promise, rejection to rejection. By midday, his throat was dry, his stomach empty, and his spirit tired of pretending. As he turned onto a busy road, a loud screech tore through the air. Tires screamed, metal cried. Then came the sound that freezes blood. Crash. A black luxury vehicle spun out of control and slammed hard into a roadside barrier. The impact was violent. Glass shattered like rain. Smoke rose from the bonnet. The driver's door flew open. For a second, the world paused. Then people ran, not toward the man inside the car, toward the car itself. "Ah! See motor! This man is loaded! Carry that bag, before police come!" Hands reached everywhere. Someone dragged out a leather briefcase. Another yanked a travel bag from the back seat. A third tried forcing open a smaller case right there on the road. The injured man lay slumped in the driver's seat, blood trickling down his forehead, eyes closed. His body was still. Too still. Bamidele shouted, "There is someone inside." No one listened. A man pushed him aside. "Shift. This is not your problem." Something snapped. Bamidele rushed forward and placed himself between the injured man and the crowd. He spread his arms wide, standing over the scattered luggage like a wall. "Leave him," he shouted. "This is a human being." They laughed. "Who sent you? Are you his security? Go and mind your poverty." Someone tried to grab a bag behind him. Bamidele turned sharply and blocked it. Another man raised his hand, angry. "You want to die for another man's money?" he asked. Bamidele's voice shook, but he did not move. "If you want this luggage," he said, "you will step over me first." For a moment, the crowd hesitated, not out of kindness but confusion. They were not used to resistance, especially not from a man who looked like life had already defeated him. Smoke thickened. The injured man groaned faintly. That sound decided everything. Bamidele rushed to the car, ignoring the insults behind him. He checked the man's pulse. Weak but present. With help from a reluctant bystander, he dragged the man out carefully. A bus slowed nearby. "Hospital!" Bamidele shouted. "Please!" They lifted the injured man inside. Bamidele gathered every piece of luggage, every bag, every case, holding them tight like they were fragile children. The crowd cursed him as the bus drove off. At the hospital, nurses rushed out. Questions flew. Papers were demanded. No one cared that Bamidele's shirt was torn or that his hands shook. He waited. Hours passed. He sat on a hard bench, guarding the luggage with his feet, his eyes never leaving it. Hunger clawed at his stomach. Fatigue pressed on his bones. Still, he did not sleep. When a nurse asked, "Are you family?" he answered honestly, "No." Yet he stayed. Evening crept in quietly. Bamidele finally stood, lifted the luggage, and left the hospital. No one stopped him. No one thanked him. The injured man had not woken up yet. As he walked back toward the uncompleted building, bags heavy in his hands, Bamidele felt the weight of temptation for the first time. Inside those bags was a life he did not have. Rent money, food money, escape money. He stopped walking. For a long moment, he stood there, alone on the roadside, staring at the luggage like it was speaking to him. Then he remembered Moronkeji's face. He continued walking. That night, as darkness swallowed the half-built walls of the uncompleted building, Bamidele stepped inside, carrying another man's wealth, while owning nothing himself. Life had finally placed him at a crossroads, and tomorrow it would ask him a question that would change everything. Bamidele entered the uncompleted building quietly, as if noise might accuse him. The night had already settled. Darkness filled the empty spaces where walls should have ended. He dropped the bags gently on the bare concrete floor, one after the other, arranging them neatly like guests who did not belong there. Moronkeji looked up. At first, she thought her eyes were lying. Then she stood. Then she froze. "Bamidele," she said slowly, pointing. "Did you steal?" The word fell hard. Bamidele exhaled. "No." She walked closer, eyes wide, circling the luggage like it might suddenly speak. Big bags, clean leather, strong zippers, the kind of things that looked expensive even in silence. "Then whose children are these?" she asked. Bamidele sat down heavily on a block. "A man had an accident. Everyone wanted to steal from him. I protected his things." Moronkeji stared at him. Protected. In a world where people were protecting only themselves. She sat down too, pulling her wrapper closer around her body. The smell of hunger was strong in the air. Their stomachs had been negotiating with emptiness all day. For a while, neither of them spoke. Then Moronkeji tapped one bag lightly with her foot. "Is it breathing?" she asked. Bamidele looked at her. "What?" "I'm asking because if something inside is breathing, we should know." Despite himself, Bamidele smiled. She crouched and shook the bag gently. Nothing. She shook another. Clink. They both froze. Their eyes met. Moronkeji's eyebrows lifted slowly. "Did you hear that?" "I heard nothing," Bamidele said quickly. She shook it again. Clink. This time louder. Moronkeji inhaled sharply. "Bamidele, even sound is confessing." He stood up immediately and stepped between her and the bags. "Don't." She straightened and folded her arms. "I just want to look. Looking is not stealing." Bamidele shook his head. "Looking leads to touching. Touching leads to regret." Moronkeji sighed and sat back down. "Okay, let me ask a reasonable question. What if this man dies?" Bamidele swallowed. "Then we return it to his people." "What if nobody comes?" "Then we still return it." She stared at him like she was studying a stubborn child. "What if food is inside?" she pressed. "What if destiny packed rice and soup for us?" Bamidele rubbed his face. "Then destiny must wait." Moronkeji laughed. Short, dry, tired laughter. "You are very strong," she said. "Strong enough to argue with hunger." Her stomach betrayed her immediately with a loud growl. They both looked down. Moronkeji burst out laughing, real laughter this time, the kind that comes when crying is tired. "You see," she said, "even my body is rebelling." Bamidele laughed too, then stopped. Silence returned. Moronkeji's voice softened. "I won't lie to you. I'm curious. I'm hungry. I'm tempted."
Bamidele nodded slowly.
"Me too." She looked at the bags again, then at him. "But if you open it," she continued, "you will never forgive yourself. And if you don't open it, hunger will shout, but your heart will sleep." Bamidele's throat tightened. She reached for his hand and squeezed it. "Whatever decision you make, I stand with you." That sentence landed heavy. He dragged the bags to a corner of the building and covered them with a cloth, like hiding fire from children. "Let them sleep," he said. Moronkeji nodded. "And let us survive." That night, they drank water and pretended it was food. They lay side by side on cold concrete, listening to rats negotiate their own lives somewhere nearby. Bamidele stared into the darkness. Inside those bags was everything they needed, but outside those bags was everything they were. He chose to hold on to that. Far away, in a hospital bed, the owner of the luggage breathed slowly, unaware that his fate and his future had passed through the hands of a hungry man who chose honesty over rescue. Tomorrow, that choice would speak, and when it did, it would speak loudly. Morning came slowly, like it was unsure whether to show itself. Bamidele left the uncompleted building before Moronkeji woke up. He washed his face with cold water, straightened his worn shirt, and whispered a prayer that sounded more like surrender than request. By the time he reached the hospital, the corridors were already awake with movement. Nurses walking fast, relatives murmuring, pain being managed quietly behind closed doors. A nurse stopped him. "The man from yesterday is awake." Bamidele's chest tightened. Inside the private room, machines hummed softly. The injured man lay propped up, his head wrapped in bandages, his eyes sharp despite the pain. Power sat on him naturally, like skin. This was Chief Adeyemi Ogunlana. The chief looked around slowly, then spoke in a low, firm voice. "Who brought me here?" Silence. Doctors glanced at nurses. Nurses glanced at Bamidele. Bamidele stepped forward. His voice came out steady, even though his heart was not. "I did, sir." The chief's eyes rested on him, took him in. The worn shoes, the tired face, the quiet strength. "And my belongings?" the chief asked. Bamidele turned and brought them forward. One bag, then another, then the briefcase. Everything. Untouched, clean, sealed. The chief stared, for a long time. Then he laughed, not loudly, but slowly, like a man hearing something unbelievable. "Do you know," the chief said, "how many people were at that accident scene?" Bamidele nodded. "Yes, sir." "Do you know what they were doing?" "Yes, sir." The chief leaned back slightly. "And you?" Bamidele swallowed. "I was protecting you." The room fell quiet. The chief closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them again, they were different. "Sit," he said. Bamidele sat. The chief studied him again, deeper this time. "You had access to everything," he said. "You could have disappeared. Nobody would have blamed you." Bamidele replied simply, "Sir, what is not mine cannot save me." That sentence landed like a blow. The chief reached for his wallet and pulled out a thick bundle of money. He extended it. "Take this." Bamidele did not move. "Sir," he said carefully, "thank you, but I didn't do it for money." The chief raised an eyebrow. "Then what do you want?" Bamidele hesitated, then spoke honestly. "Work." The chief stared at him again, then nodded slowly. "Good," he said. "You will come tomorrow." That was all. No praise, no drama, no promises. Just one sentence. From that day, Bamidele entered a new world quietly. He swept offices bigger than his entire former house. He ran errands without complaint. He stood when told, sat when allowed, spoke only when necessary. No shortcuts, no entitlement. Some staff laughed at him. Some ignored him. Some watched. The chief watched the most. He noticed how Bamidele returned excess change, how he refused bribes, how he spoke respectfully to everyone regardless of status, how he never mentioned the accident. One evening the chief asked him casually, "Where do you live?" Bamidele hesitated. "An uncompleted building, sir." The chief did not react. He only nodded. At home, Moronkaji continued to wait for him with the same quiet faith. Some days he came with food. Some days he came with stories. Some days he came with nothing but himself. She never asked for more. Friends who once advised her to leave now watched in silence. Some felt shame. Some felt envy. She felt peace. Weeks passed. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, the chief called Bamidele into his office. "Do you know why I called you?" he asked. Bamidele shook his head. The chief stood and walked to the window. "I have wealth," he said. "I have power. I have influence." He turned. "But I do not have a son." Bamidele's heart skipped. "I have been watching you," the chief continued, "and I have seen something rare." He paused. Integrity that did not bend when hunger knocked. Bamidele felt his knees weaken. The day destiny decided to speak, it did not shout. It cleared its throat. Bamidele woke that morning with a strange calm in his chest. Not joy, not fear, just a stillness that felt like the pause before rain finally falls. Moronkaji noticed it immediately. "You're quiet today," she said. "Some days," he replied gently, "the heart is just listening." He left for work as usual, unaware that this would be the last day his life answered to routine. At the chief's residence, staff moved differently. Voices were hushed. Faces carried expectation. Bamidele felt it the moment he stepped in, like the air itself knew something he didn't. He was summoned. Inside the large hall, elders sat in quiet rows. Executives stood stiffly. Family members watched with unreadable faces. At the center sat Chief ADEMOYE Ogunlana, calm, composed, eyes sharp with intention. Bamidele's legs felt heavy. "Kneel," the chief said. Bamidele obeyed. "Stand," the chief said again. Confusion rippled through the room. The chief rose slowly, his voice steady but carrying weight. "Months ago," he began, "I lay helpless on the road, surrounded by people who saw my wealth before they saw my life." Murmurs spread. "One man," the chief continued, "stood between me and greed, between my body and death, between my property and theft. The chief turned his gaze fully on Bamidele. That man is here. Silence fell so thick it pressed on chests. I tested him, the chief said. Not once, not twice. I watched him hungry. I watched him tempted. I watched him refuse what would have saved him. The chief's voice tightened. I have power, he said, but power without character is noise. I have wealth, but wealth without integrity is rot. He paused. I have no son. Gasps filled the hall. So I chose one. The chief lifted his hand and placed it firmly on Bamidele's shoulder. This is the man who will inherit my business, my name, and my trust. The room exploded. Shock, whispers, protest in swallowed breaths. Bamidele swayed. Tears blurred his vision. He fell to his knees again, this time not because he was told, but because his legs could no longer carry the weight of what was happening. I was hungry, he cried. I was broken. I was nothing. The chief bent down and lifted him. You were everything, he said quietly. News traveled faster than pain ever did. By evening, Moronk-Eji stood frozen as cars lined the dusty road near the uncompleted building. People who once avoided her eyes now bowed their heads. Voices that once advised her to leave now trembled with apology. When Bamidele stepped out of the car and walked toward her, dressed cleanly, standing taller than life itself, Moronk-Eji broke. She cried the tears she had swallowed for too long. Bamidele held her tightly. We're going home, he whispered. But not just to a house, she replied through tears. To dignity. Kunle Adesina watched the news from a distance. The same man he had scammed, the same man he had laughed at, now standing beside a chief. Kunle turned away. Some losses speak for themselves. On the day Bamidele and Moronk-Eji moved into their new home, the house had doors that locked, windows that smiled at sunlight, and floors that did not apologize for comfort. Moronk-Eji walked slowly through the rooms, touching walls like they might disappear. This is not luck, she said. No, Bamidele answered. This is payment delayed, not denied. That night, Bamidele stood alone on the balcony, staring into the distance. He remembered the uncompleted building, the hunger, the locked bag, the choice. He knew then what the story was really about. Not wealth, not power, but who you choose to be when nobody is watching.